We just spoke to Jesse Kelly, who's a member of UAW Local 160, about the incredibly important negotiations happening between 150,000 UAW workers and the big three automakers, which includes Ford, GM, and Stellantis, which is what you may know as Fiat Chrysler. That's the name for it now. The contract expires September 14th at 11:59 p.m. So by midnight, as soon as it turns to September 15th, if there is no deal done, a strike is happening. And in the midst of just the explosion and subsidies for that explosion of electric vehicles and that construction, the workers are just not seeing the benefits of that whatsoever. They took a haircut during the 2008 financial collapse when the auto industry was bailed out. That did not trickle down to the workers, and they've been, for decades, as was explained to me by Jesse, constantly being, being forced into contracts that were exploitative, and they're just not taking it anymore. And they now have leadership in Shawn Fain who represents that anger righteously, and he's been doing very cool things like ripping up the contracts on over Zoom meetings, I believe. Talk about a 4-day work week. Oh yeah, good stuff. Yeah, he tore up one of the contracts during a live stream, and more stuff. So here he is speaking in Michigan over the weekend.
Recently I quoted a statement by Malcolm X. And when he spoke about freedom, he talked about people saying they believe in freedom, but in the next breath they tell you what they won't do to get it. All right. So I got to ask how far are you willing to go to get the contract you deserve?
By any means necessary, which, there you go. Hear that, GM, Ford, Stellantis, and there was a leak. I believe it was to CNBC. Was that the article that was in the packet about trying to ship the production of the Ford, the Ram, 1500 over to Mexico? Which, it's just, it's so convenient that story came out in the press in the midst of these negotiations. And
nice truck you got there. Would be a real shame.
Yeah, it would be a real shame if we basically take your jobs away in retaliation for wanting a contract that isn't that isn't entirely exploitative.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I know a guy in North Dakota who has a Ram, and he bought it because he didn't want to buy a Japanese truck.
Yeah,
and it's
that's central to their branding.
Exactly, that's why people buy Chevys and Fords and Dodges for this long. Mm-hmm. And we need to pivot that to as long as it's unionized, I'm basically cool with it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Fain's been awesome. I would recommend people look up his comments on the 32-hour work week, because just the way that these guys can elaborate, less of your life needs to be serving the boss. You need both more money and wages and more of your life back from this sort of thing. And I think that's a really important thing, because I'll leave it there.
Well, it gives a general posture of righteous antagonism towards the boss, and that creates an education about the power of your labor that has a bunch of different branches, including actions like this. And I'm just thrilled, honestly, that these automakers are so scared. They should be. This would be a really important strike, and second to only what we were potentially going to see if the Teamsters and UPS did not come to a contract, just given the scope of what that strike would mean.
And that vote is ending tomorrow, so
yes,
we'll see about that.
We shall see. Although when we had a representative from the Teamsters on, they were pretty optimistic
Right.
and happy with the concessions. But not the case right now with the UAW. So stand strong, support anybody in your life who's a member of the UAW or anybody that you know, and just generally. And if the time comes for a strike, support them in the best way that you can, either from afar with solidarity, or if you can donate to their strike fund. That's the way to promote this kind of solidarity.
The interviewee earlier said, support us any way you can. And I think, honestly, we are downplay the social media activism because it doesn't really take the place or substitute for knocking on doors and stuff like that. But in a situation like this, absolutely flood these social networks with pro-union messaging, because you need to nullify the potential negative effect they can have. So anytime somebody's trying to do something that attacks solidarity, maybe we should get that Matt Damon clip ready. But anytime you can, this is the moment to be an unapologetic propagandist for labor power. And we cannot allow any sort of oh no, let's maybe criticize the teachers unions now for this. You bully those people off the platform. And this older clip of Matt Damon, which I think was taking the place during a teacher strike in about a decade ago. 2011, and it's perfect because it's a Reason TV, libertarian, Koch-backed.
I was wondering who asked this question.
Yeah, so it's Reason, and Reason is they'll occasionally you'll see good articles from them saying war is bad and stuff like that. And but the thing to know about that is just the best foot that they could ever put forward.
Right.
This is a libertarianism in America, and Reason specifically, are fundamentally servile institutions, and I think this really shows why.
In acting, there isn't job security, right? There's an incentive to work hard and be a better actor because you want to have a job. So why isn't it like that for teachers?
You think job insecurity is what makes me work hard?
Well, you have an incentive to work harder, but if there's job security,
be an actor. It's not an incentive. That's the thing. So you take this MBA style thinking, right? It's the problem with ed policy right now. There's this intrinsically paternalistic view of problems that are much more complex than that. It's like saying a teacher is going to get lazy when they have tenure. A teacher wants to teach. Why else would you take a shitty salary and really long hours and do that job unless you really love to do it?
10% that are bad, though? 10% of teachers are bad.
where'd you get that number?
I don't know. 10% of people in any profession maybe should think of something else.
Well, okay, but maybe you're a shitty cameraman. I don't know.
When he said the paternalistic part, I almost stood up out of my chair.
That was like the real life version of what Matt Damon does to that Harvard guy in the bar.
How about them apples? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he did go there, right? So perhaps the only Harvard graduate I can think of off the top of my head who I really like.
So Matt, so the interesting context of this clip too, two separate things is that Matt Damon I also think is informed because his mom, who's in the clip, she was a school teacher. She was a child education teacher. And interestingly, this reporter, Michelle Fields, was the woman who accused former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski of sexually assaulting her.
Wow.
So
okay.
that was her first stop before she was a Breitbart reporter and on the 2016 campaign. So kind of interesting moment in time there in 2011 at the march in Washington, D.C. for school teachers.
Yeah, she's the daughter of television film writer Greg Fields. So interesting. I'm kind of almost distracted by how that. First of all, we've criticized Matt Damon for his crypto ad, but that. Look, it's forgiven. We're back at least zero. Maybe you're even a step forward with that, because that is the perfect this woman. What's her name? Fields. She didn't need to be starved in order to want to become a Reason TV hack.
Right.
And it's this is like the real divide between people, is the people who think we need to make sure we're cracking the whip on these people who work for a living so they work harder, and the people that are like, actually, no, we need to live. We need to focus on people having lives and actually trust them that like the things will get done. Like the idea that if we had a more equal society where people weren't worried about rent and healthcare payments, that like people would be more teachers.
Right.
like I would have looked to teaching. I would have loved to have gone straight into teaching, and I almost tried, but like the only ways I could get in were like Teach for America at that point or whatever.
Yeah.
But like teaching should be I mean, it's a calling that a lot of people feel, but you can't do it because you have too many student loans, and you'll never pay that off. I mean, yeah, like I mean, that servileness of like, shouldn't we starve people so they perform, labor for us is just so gross.
I also where do they get that 10% of teachers are bad figure, right? It's just completely made up. I mean,
I said I don't know. He just
I'm gonna
said
say
it.
50% of Wall Street traders are coked out of their minds. I've just made that up, but I could say that, and it would be, a justification to say that workforce should be cut in half. Half those jobs, complete leeches. They don't need to exist.
But
I mean, you could just make that. You could say that about any profession, and it's just it's a prerequisite for austerity.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an anti-union talking point that basically, like, if teachers are bad, like the best context to deal with bad teachers, I think, is with all the other teachers who are there saying, "Oh, I'm one of the 90%. This guy's a problem for X, Y reason. Maybe he's like, creeping on kids or something like that." Like, yeah, the union can bump these people out better than a system where everyone's at like the beck and call of certain administrators. Like, yeah, it is. I mean, when they say to create an incentive, what you just understand what that means is to create desperation. Yep, a whip.
And I just want to point this out. I sent this. It is forgiven, the crypto stuff, because Matt Damon has been kind of like an advocate for this stuff for years. This is from 2000. That Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were advocating for workers at Harvard. I believe it was cafeteria workers to get a higher wage. All workers on campus. At the time, that was an increase from $10 an hour to $10.25 an hour. So he's been vocal about this stuff for a while and has been good as well with the writers and actor strikes. So Matt Damon's our favorite celebrity of the day.
It's crazy. Like that, there's so much there though in that question of, don't you need an incentive? Like, don't you need to be worried you're going to be on the streets in order for you to do this job? And like that, I mean, that's such a sick attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a call here. Calling from a 616 area code. 616, who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, this is Bato T from Elmer City, Washington.
Bato T?
Yeah, that's what my students call me.
Ah, Bato T. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Well, I am one of those teachers in a union who gets to see bad teachers every now and then. Mm-hmm. But they're rare. Right. I think 10% is really high.
Should we strip you of your collective bargaining rights in order to deal with them?
No, actually, the funny thing is I was calling to complain about how our collective bargaining went this year, but you guys are on probably a more pertinent project or line of thought. There's just points in time where the union has the obligation to exert some authority and some leverage when they can, especially with collective bargaining agreements. That is the point of the union a lot of times, once they're already established. So, I just am looking for some of the labor unions that are active right now, because mine is not, to come out and say to the Democratic Party, look, we helped you get here. Now you have to help us, or we're not coming again in November. And that's all I wanted to say. I'll let you guys respond off there.
My take has been that the
Appreciate
unions
you.
should not be rushing to endorse Biden, even if ultimately that's going to be their best table-in option. They should hold out and make a story out of it, and Biden should do more for unions.
I think that's a good take.